The Giants surprised people again when they gave Joc Pederson the $19.65 million qualifying offer. He has until tomorrow to decide whether or not to accept it. We'll get to your questions about Pederson and much more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, I just want to get to some more mailbag questions. We had like 40 from last week. Certainly didn't get to them all, and some more trickled in over the weekend. So without further delay, Tycho says, do you think the Giants gave Joc Pederson the qualifying offer because they were certain he would pass to play with a more playoff-ready team? So it's funny, there's so many theories out there. The general consensus that I've seen, at least from those who are vocal about it, is that it was a mistake, or it was a extremely bold move. I guess it was extremely bold to give Joc Pederson the qualifying offer, and we're searching for theories about it. But to me, no, I don't think at all that they gave it to him because they were certain he would want to pass on it. It's way too much of a risk I don't think certainty exists. When you offer a player a lot of money, they're liable to accept it. And so I think that they gave it to him because they want him back, and that this was a way to force the issue. And so the way I see it is that, some of the predicted contracts for Pederson, when we look at MLB trade rumors, ESPN, Fangraphs, had him making 10 to 12 million a year, but over multiple years. And so maybe those predictions end up being a little bit below what he was going to be able to get. In fact, we had some reports from, real reporters, not just rumors online, but that Pederson was receiving 3-year interest from teams. And so, I don't know, say it's 3 years, 36 million that ultimately teams would have been offering Pederson. It could even be more, 3 years, 39 million. And then suddenly, if you're offering 1 year a little less than 20 million, it's a decision to make if you're Pederson, because the 39 million, which is, again, imaginary, I'm just making up what a number might be, 36 million, 39 million, regardless, that's more than 20 million. And so for Pederson, you'd be getting more guaranteed money. But if you take the Giants qualifying offer, you'd be getting more money per year, but only for 1 year. So you'd have to prove it again and then go back into the market next year. And so I do think, I lean towards that he'll ultimately accept it. And the reason he wouldn't accept it is if that market is really strong and maybe there is 3-year interest, and maybe even beyond 3 years, 39 million, maybe 14 million a year, 15. Probably not. I think 339 is probably somewhat of a cap, but then giving him the qualifying offer hurts that market, because if you're, a good player, but not an upper tier player, do teams really want to pay you plus surrender a significantly high draft pick? It's not like your first round pick, but if you're a luxury tax team, for example, if you paid luxury tax, you surrender a 2nd round pick and a 5th round pick to sign any qualifying offer player, any player who rejected the qualifying offer. So this hurts him rather dramatically. If you're, a team in the Giants standings, you would just surrender your 2nd highest draft pick and you lose some international bonus pool money, but it's a lot of penalties just to sign a player who's kind of a mid-tier player in a way. Joc Pederson, he's not just your ho-hum mid-tier player. What he is he's flawed at some things, but he's elite at other things. And so if you're a team like the Giants, he was good for the Giants this year. It's not like he was the problem with this team. Defensively, he didn't help them. And I've seen it written that, he gave all of his value back on defense, but that's not true. He was still, a player who produced about $16.5 million of value in 2022, despite being terrible defensively. And so You know, he's only 30. I don't think he has to be terrible defensively. It's not like he has been terrible every year of his career. He's been below average, but this year, 2022, it was his worst year defensively. And so, yeah, ultimately, I think they gave him the qualifying offer because they want him back. And this is one of the better ways to assure themselves that he will be back. But we won't know until tomorrow at 2 p.m. what he decides. And so, you know, tomorrow at 2 p.m. is a huge day. And the fact is, he could sign with another team. He could take the Giants qualifying offer. He could reject it and just remain a free agent. He could work out a different deal with the Giants, like a multi-year deal with the Giants. Everything's in play, but ultimately he just has to say, I either accept it or reject it by tomorrow at 2 p.m. So the next question comes from Lance, who says, would you rather sign the combination of Judge and Rizzo or Rodón and Correa? And this is a kind of tough one, perhaps. I think it depends on what those contracts ultimately end up being. And so I'm gonna assume that the contracts are what the median, just for the sake of example, I'm gonna assume the median contract when we look at MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and Fangraphs. So for Judge, that's 9 years, $324 million. For Rizzo, that's 2 years, $34 million. Both of those players received qualifying offers, and so the Giants would have to surrender their second highest pick and I believe also their third highest pick to sign both of those guys. And then for Correa, he was ineligible to receive the qualifying offer. The contract prediction, the median, 9 years, $288 million. And for Rodón, obviously he got the qualifying offer, but he got it from the Giants. And so, you know, the Giants don't have to surrender a pick to themselves for signing Rodón. So the prediction here is for 5 years, $130 million. So the total money is $418 million for Correa and Rodón, and for Judge and Rizzo, it's $358 million. But when all is said and done, I think that I lean towards spreading it around with Correa and Rodón, actually. But I don't love giving the 5 years to Rodón. I would not at all love giving 9 years to Aaron Judge. But if it's shorter term, if you can somehow get in Judge for 6 years at a higher average annual value, I just don't love Rizzo. Again, it's the similar case to Pederson, but the Giants would be surrendering a draft pick with Rizzo. Obviously, when it's your own player, you don't. But Rizzo's not the type of guy I want to pay the money to and surrender picks. There are other players out there. Jose Abreu doesn't have draft pick compensation tied to him. And I don't know. I'm not sure Rizzo is like significantly better than Pederson. And so I'd rather, I don't know. That wasn't the question, but it depends on the contract. Certainly Judge is a better player right now, I think. But 9 years is a long time for a guy who's going to be 31 in year one of a deal. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. Questions about these two. Is Shohei Ohtani actually still in play for a trade, this offseason? We'll get to it in just a second. But before we do, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis, whether it's the Warriors, the 49ers, the San Francisco Giants, and MLB free agency. Every week or so, they send in my inbox for my email these updated odds for where these top free agents are going to land. It's really interesting to see where the Giants are. They have been coming in as the most likely destination for Aaron Judge if he were to leave the Yankees. And when they started out sending out these odds, they had the Giants like 9th. And I said on my show and on Twitter that that was a mistake. Like, if he leaves New York, the Giants should be, I said, top 3, but really number 1 probably if he leaves New York. That's the thing. I think the Yankees are still the favorites. Also, the implied odds, even though Judge is number 1, are only 33%, even though the Giants are number 1. And so the combination of everybody else's odds is still 67%. And so, I don't know, it's really interesting. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we're going to get into some superstars here with Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani taking up our attention. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So yes, the next question comes from Andrew, who says, do they have any internal desire to make a huge trade for Ohtani? And Ohtani is somebody I discussed quite a bit in the early days of the offseason and even during the season at times as someone that we weren't hearing a lot about, and yet to me becomes an obvious trade candidate this winter. And I actually thought, to go on a bit of a tangent, Ken Rosenthal recently wrote an article kind of about this topic because the Angels general manager said recently Shohei Ohtani will not be traded this offseason. But I thought Ken Rosenthal did a good job pointing out Rizzo, for Mike Rizzo, blanking on his first name, of the Washington Nationals, their general manager, said like 2 months before they traded Soto, Juan Soto is absolutely not being traded. And so I take these things with a grain of salt. Just because they say that, I mean, it could just be to like drive up interest and say, hey, you're not going to trade him, but we really want him, you know, and stuff like that does have an effect. So is there interest? Of course there's interest. But what I must say, and this is what Ken Rosenthal nailed, is that a lot of people make the huge mistake, in my opinion. Like, it's so wrong to say, like, at last year's deadline, people will say, well, maybe the Angels don't trade him now and they're going to wait until the offseason when there will be more interest and it'll drive up the price even more. There's just a 0% chance that you pay more after a postseason is played out. Teams will 100% unequivocally pay more when you're getting the rights to him for 2 postseason runs versus 1. There's just no question about it. And so the fact that the Angels did not trade Ohtani last deadline, like last July, what means that his price has gone down significantly. Not saying he's any less of a player. It's just simply less time that you have him and one less chance at a championship with this player to lead you there. And so the question, what got me going on this was that you're saying a huge trade for Ohtani. And in fact, there was a story in The Athletic where they kind of put out a trade proposal from the Giants' perspective, and I think it's a huge overpay. You're not giving up, to me, Marco Luciano and Kyle Harrison and Luis Matos and somebody else, David VR. That is just way too much. As great as Ohtani is, literally, if not number one of the top 2, perhaps, players in the game, probably number 1 at this moment, but it's 1 season. Like, imagine if he got hurt, you know, and then you've given up your entire farm system, essentially, like the best guys you have and all of them for 1 year of one player. And there's no guarantee. If you could guarantee that he would be willing to sign a fair extension with you, then that's different a little bit. But you just don't know. You could bring him in and then he says, you know what, I just want to test free agency the next winter. And then you've given up so much for 1 season of a great player, but 1 season. And then there's a very real chance that they don't stick around. And then you've wasted Luciano, Harrison, VR, and Matos for 1 season. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I could possibly see a deal like that with one of Harrison or Luciano, but not both. That's just my opinion. And also precedent is on my side. If we look at the Mookie Betts deal with the Dodgers, it was the same situation. 1 year left of Betts, and it just wasn't that much that the Red Sox got back for Mookie Betts. They got Alex Verdugo, they got Jeter Downs, they got, who was it, Connor Wong, and they also got the Dodgers to take on about $50 million of salary owed to David Price. But still, people compare it to Soto. It's apples to oranges because Soto, when he was dealt to the Padres, had 2.5 years of team control remaining. So you're talking about 3 postseason runs, 3 seasons in which you get Soto for a playoff run. And that is just vastly different than 1 season. And likewise, as Ken Rosenthal pointed out, if the Angels don't trade him now and they wait until July, the price will go down even more. Not too much more because, I mean, significantly, because you've missed out on 4 months of Shohei Ohtani if you're acquiring him. You're only getting him for a guaranteed couple of months. And so, yeah, I mean, do they have a desire? Certainly. If Ohtani's available, because it wouldn't take, I don't think, the type of package that was thrown out there in The Athletic. And at the same time, he's a great generational talent, and you would do everything you could to probably try to extend him, just like the Dodgers did ultimately with Betts. So anyway, yes, if he's available, that'll become really interesting, and I certainly could see the Giants being all in on trying to acquire him, as would pretty much every other team. Depressed Giants fan says, will they actually get Judge or a superstar for once? And I lean towards yes. Over my shoulder now, it says Trey Turner season on YouTube here. And it has been saying Aaron Judge. And so I think I went on record on Friday saying I believe the Giants will end up with one of these top 4 free agents. And really, I said top 3, Aaron Judge, Carlos Correa, Trey Turner. Xander Bogaerts is perhaps in that conversation. I just happen to think, when you talk about defense being a big need, I have some concerns, certainly about Bogaerts as a shortstop, perhaps as a second baseman, but are you really committing 189? That's the prediction here. Median of these predictions is 7 years, 189 million for a guy who doesn't hit for a lot of power and hasn't been great defensively in his career. I have some concerns. Whereas Trey Turner is like that impact athleticism, and Carlos Correa wasn't great defensively this year. By the way, Mike Petriello on MLB.com did in far more detail what we've been kind of trying to do at times, talk about who's the best, how do you rank these guys defensively, the 4 shortstops, Correa, Turner, Bogaerts, and Swanson, because they all had weird years. Like some guys were really good in 2022 with a track record of not being very good. Some guys were not good in 2022 with a track record of being great. And so it is confusing, and that article is worth a read if you're interested in kind of checking out the various elite players here. But I'm saying it, I think that they're primed to bring in one of those 3 guys. So ultimately you got to pay up to land the players, and it remains to be seen if they will. But it seems like the stars are kind of aligning for them, but ultimately we're going to have to wait to find out. So coming up in just a minute, does Aaron Judge actually make the Giants younger and more athletic? Despite all the attention we're paying to Aaron Judge's free agency, does he even fit the mantra of what this offseason is supposedly all about? So we'll get to that in just a minute, but first. All right, as promised, does Aaron Judge actually make the Giants younger and more athletic? Cobert Gobert says, does signing Judge help them do that? He's a good/great defender in right field and fine on the bases right now, but probably not for the duration of his contract. And that is certainly right. And that's where I start to squirm when we're talking about 9 years. That is just too long. And actually, I think it was Ken Rosenthal, another article in The Athletic today, talking about how some in the game believe that some of these predictions that have come out, some in the industry and presumably, general managers and high-ranking executives are skeptical about the kind of total amounts and the years that we're seeing in some of the predictions. And that's what I'm thinking, particularly with Judge. Like, I think that if he ultimately gets this kind of deal, 9 years, $324 million, it'll probably be from the Yankees, because they'll be threatened by teams like the Giants, like really trying to steal him away. And the Yankees are made of money, and this is just an overpay, like from a year's perspective, and therefore the dollars end up being a lot too. But 9 years to a guy his size, who's already 31 in year 1, it's just not going to be good. Probably starting at age 35, 36, and then you're talking 36, 37, 38, 39. Like half the deal might end up being pretty disastrous if this is the contract. So I'm okay with a couple of disaster years at the end. But am I okay with half the deal being a disaster? I mean, you just don't know, right? He could just be that special exception where he just continues to be great. But 9 years is a long time. I mean, he hasn't been in the league for 9 years or even close to it. And we're talking, I would love to see the Giants come in 6, maybe 7 years, or get creative perhaps in, you only get those years if the performance warrants. But the thing is, if some other team is willing to do this, then he's not going to accept something less. And so your question is, does he make them younger and more athletic? I must point out, Farhan Zaidi was clear when I first heard him say, we want to get younger and more athletic. He cut himself off and corrected himself. And he said, it's not actually necessarily about age. He specifically said he shouldn't have said younger. What he meant specifically was they need more durability. They need players who are going to be on the field. And so, I mean, I think about someone like Jose Abreu, who is, older. He's 36, I think, and yet he has been as durable as they've come. But Judge, I mean, he's got some injury history. Like if we look at 2018, he only played 112 games. 2019, 102 games. 2020, 60-game season, he only played 28 games. And so 3 years in a row, he missed 50-plus games. In 2020, he missed more than half the games. And then the other 2 years, he missed 50 to 60 games. And so the last 2 years, he's played 148 and 157 respectively. And so that's fantastic. But when you project, like literally into a guy's age 39 season, is he going to be that durable player? And so I'd be willing to take that risk absolutely on a 6-year deal or so. Maybe 7 is like what you might need to push yourself to just to be in the fight in terms of trying to bring this player in. But if he ends up getting 9 years, then it doesn't at all jive with the idea of getting more athletic and more durable, because there's just so much risk there. And I'm not saying if he's the only guy out there, then whatever, maybe you just do it. But you've got Carlos Correa, who also has some injury past, and you've got Trey Turner, who's been a little bit more durable, I believe, without having his numbers pulled up here. But I mean, Trey Turner is certainly getting more athletic, but I mean, Judge is very athletic for his size, as you mentioned. But will he be for 9 years? No, there's just no way. I just seriously doubt that. So the next question comes from EJ Coleman, who says odds of Belt returning with Pederson and Longoria events. So the Pederson and Longoria events, obviously, Pederson getting the qualifying offer. We don't yet know if he accepts it or not. Like I said, 3 different things are possible tomorrow. He could accept it, and then he's on the Giants for 1 year, $19.65 million. He could reject it and just remain a free agent, and his new team and salary is to be determined. Or he could, I guess 4 things are possible, but the third thing being he could sign under different terms with either the Giants or some other team. Could be like a 3-year deal. So anyway, there's no resolution there on Pederson yet. I think the assumption people are making is that he will accept the offer. I am operating under that assumption as well, but I'm not totally sure on it. And then with Longoria, they obviously rejected the club option. And again, though, it's not clear what his future holds. He did put out a post on Instagram basically saying thank you to the fans, and seemed like a goodbye. And so perhaps that indicates that he doesn't think he'll be back. I mean, it seemingly did indicate that. So odds of a Belt return with those events, what are the odds of it? I don't know, 20% that he does return. I think it's possible. They keep saying that they're monitoring his rehab from knee surgery. Belt said like a month and a half ago he felt better than he's ever felt great, felt fantastic. And yet the Giants are saying we're going to monitor his rehab. And so I don't know, maybe Belt over-projecting a little bit of strength there. The thing is, if you look at a lot of these free agents, Belt has been one of the best guys over the last 3 years on a per-plate appearance basis. He's just still been impactful when he's been on the field. He wasn't in 2022, but he was so much in 2020 and 2021. And so it would probably end up being like a 1-year deal for a few $1,000,000. Like, could he be worth taking a flyer on, where you're not relying on him to be your like everyday first baseman, but he's just someone who's in the mix and the upside is still there? I could possibly see it, but it does seem like they're prepared to move on from, Belt, who's obviously a big injury risk coming off of this surgery. But if they monitor the rehab and he looks great and he's moving well, then you could see it. And I mean, with Pederson, does he kind of take that spot away from Belt? I don't know. If Belt is moving well, perhaps they could see him as that first baseman, at least as the left-handed side of a platoon. A lot of moving parts, but I would bet against Belt returning and Longoria returning at this moment in time. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories in sports of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. It's like the sports page in podcast form with the unique insights of the local experts on the biggest stories. It's really a fantastic way to get your daily sports fix. Anyway, once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. A lot of news coming out tomorrow. They also need to add players in advance of the Rule 5 draft, so that's going to be really interesting. So please come back throughout the rest of the week. Anyway, thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.